umana cosa è l'avere compassione agli afflitti. It is a human thing to have compassion for the afflicted. That's the opening line to Boccaccio's Decameron, the account of this remarkably prolific writer and poet of it's his historical account of a plague that passed in the spring of 1348. But he structures this book as a way of fighting back against the plague. The plague had killed many people in Florence of that year, and he came up with this storytelling device where he had a group of characters who are trying to flee the pestilence, to, in a sense, social distance from the broader public. So they all got together, individually, not social distancing, and to pass the time, they were all going to tell stories. And they would tell stories as a way of trying to get a little bit of solace, a little bit of entertainment in what is a very a long stretch of boredom, sitting around waiting for the time to pass so that this pestilence could clear out. And the construction of the work was then there were 7 women and 3 men, and they would spend 10 days telling stories, each one telling a story each day. Thus, you have 10 stories per day, over 10 days, 100 stories. It is a very intricate patterning, and they work out this organization for how it's to be done, but it was an expression of quite a remarkable structure. And in that, you can see a certain medieval tendency. This is 1348 Florence. It's still, it's still technically the Middle Ages, the way some historians like to clock it. But in that, you can see this elaborate superstructure, this elaborate patterning that the Middle Ages and the medieval era was so fond of, and he is taking his cue essentially from his hero or rival or great example. I don't know how you want to call it, but Dante. Dante was still alive when Boccaccio was born. Boccaccio was, I think, around 8 or so when Dante finally died. And to be in Florence in that era, you had to be under an extraordinary influence by Dante. And so you can see, just like Dante had the 100 canti to the Divine Comedy, here we have 100 stories, and the number 100 is considered a perfect number, and yada yada yada. You can go crazy with numerology. But while being embedded in that medieval framework, you have also a great tendency to break out of it. It's almost as if he erects this framework kind of the way Dante did, but maybe even more so that he has something to rub against, because the spirit of these stories, of these 100 stories, is much different than the medieval sentiments. The very beginning, the umana cosa, it is a human thing. Umana is the first word of this book. Human, not godly, not religious, not spiritual, not ideal. It is a human thing. And the focus of the book is very much on human beings. Much interplay with notions of religion and all that. He was not an atheist by any means, but it's a shifting focus towards humanity. It is a human thing to have compassion for the afflicted. So he is looking around at his fellow Florentines and feeling compassion for them, and he tries to help. And the beginning of this book, he writes what is called the Proemio. It's a preface, essentially, where he lays out the purpose of it. And he says that, well, when I was younger, I felt very overwhelmed by passion and love, and I felt almost victimized by it. And I know what it's like to be tortured like that. But over time, I grew out of it, essentially. I stopped being so vulnerable to it. And he now wants to give back. And he singles out women particularly. He says that, well, men, they can go hunting, they can hang out with the guys, they have other affairs that they're allowed to go and do. Women, because they are women, are supposed to stay home, and they're always locked up in the house. So he is appealing to them, essentially. He's writing this almost directly for them. He says, I intend to provide succor and diversion for the ladies, but only for those who are in love, since the others can make do with their needles, their reels, and their spindles. Which is kind of sexist, but still, he's picking a focus. And he's giving attention to women who are arguably somewhat overlooked in society. So there's that. I shall narrate 100 stories or fables or parables or histories or whatever you choose to call them, recited in 10 days by a worthy band of 7 ladies and 3 men who assembled together during a plague which recently took such a heavy toll of life. And I shall also include songs which these 7 ladies sang for their mutual amusement. He's trying to focus on one another. And in this, he talks about how when he was in love and when he was suffering from love, as all medievalists always did, he got over it because of his friends. He got over it by people coming together to help him. He felt the human connection of other people coming to join in the project and make his pain less. And that's what he's trying to do here. And that's what he sets out in this poem, to sit there and say, we can all suffer together and make the suffering less. We'll just take our minds off it. We'll use stories. We will use entertainment. These simple coming together and sharing a story, regardless of what the story is an act of therapy, if nothing else. Yes, the stories will have some underlying themes and some underlying messages, and you can argue those one way or the other. But the simple act of joining together when all the world outside is pressing in and you feel so alienated from it, so much so that you cannot go outside to enter into that world even because of this pestilence that's everywhere, when you are locked inside and all you have is one another. Stories can bring you together. They can pass the time, they can educate you, but they give you an organizing principle in humanity. And that's how he begins. And the stories start coming thereafter. But it's that idea, that key spirit of the work that keeps it all together. Because the stories are going to be very disparate. The stories are going to go all over the place. There's lots of psychodrama everywhere. The characters are going to be kind of hard to follow at times. But that animating spirit of we just need to band together and we can get through this, that's inspiring. And that is the Renaissance taking off, because it's human beings helping human beings, regardless of what God is doing outside.